Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into a character I think gets overlooked a lot in The Lord of the Rings,
Oh, yeah. Who are we looking at today?
Faramir. We've
Okay.
got some excellent sources on him, articles, analyses, the works, and I'm ready to unlock the secrets of this guy.
Sounds intriguing. Most people just think of him as, like, Boromir's less famous brother. But
Right.
I have a feeling we're about to discover there's more to him than meets the eye.
That's what I'm hoping. He is Boromir's brother, though. You're right. Both sons of Denethor, the steward of Gondor.
Right, right. Which basically means the big boss until the king comes back. But even just from the basic setup, Faramir being this scholar, fascinated by history and lore.
Doesn't really scream son of Denethor, does it?
Not exactly. Denethor is all about military might, that whole strength above all else kind of leader. Faramir, though, he's almost the opposite. Thoughtful, introspective. It really makes you wonder about their relationship.
Especially since all the sources mention Denethor favoring Boromir, like way back when they were kids.
Oh, for sure. Can you imagine growing up like that? Constantly compared to your older brother, who's everything your dad admires?
Ouch. That's got to leave a mark.
You bet. And I think that's part of why Faramir develops this strong sense of duty and responsibility, but it's almost self-effacing, you know? Like he's trying so hard to earn his dad's approval, but deep down, he's given up on actually getting it.
Man, that's rough. And then you throw the whole ring situation into the mix. Talk about a test of character.
When Faramir meets Frodo and Sam in Ithilien, it really is a pivotal moment in his story because everyone else who comes across that ring, they're tempted by it. Gandalf even fears its power.
But Faramir just refuses it.
Straight up, like he gets what the ring is about, how even if you think you're using it for good, it'll corrupt you in the end. He understands the insidious nature of it.
I remember that line, something like, I wouldn't pick this thing up even if I found it lying on the road. Takes some serious willpower.
Yeah, and remember, his brother Boromir completely fell for the ring's trap. So this scene with Faramir, it's not just him showing off his willpower, it's a whole different philosophy from Boromir or even Denethor. He gets that true strength is saying no to that kind of power, not grabbing it.
And the crazy part is, he doesn't just refuse the ring. He helps Frodo and Sam, even though they're supposed to be enemies in Gondor.
Right. I mean, Denethor would have flipped out. He's all about defending Gondor at any cost, even if it means getting kind of shady.
But Faramir, he sees the bigger picture.
He gets it. Defeating Sauron, it takes more than brute force. You need moral integrity, too. You gotta make the tough choices, even if they put you at risk. It's about the greater good, you know?
So we've got Faramir, this incredibly moral guy, willing to sacrifice himself, always trying to please his dad, who just doesn't seem to care. And then boom, that mission to Osgiliath, where he almost dies because of Denethor's stubbornness. It's heavy stuff. What do you think Tolkien was trying to say with all this father-son drama?
Oh man, there's a lot there. I think it's about the damage pride can do, how despair can just eat a person up. Denethor is so messed up over losing Boromir, he can't even see Faramir for who he is. All his own screw-ups, he dumps them on Faramir, pushes him away even more.
It's heartbreaking, but Faramir does find some hope eventually.
But Eowyn, yeah, another character who's dealt with a whole lot of rejection.
And it's interesting because they don't exactly fit the classic Tolkien hero mold. Neither of them are charging into battle, leading armies.
Totally. But they've got this inner strength, this resilience that draws them to each other. It's like they just get each other, you know, they've both been through a lot, and they find comfort in that shared understanding.
I love that. And it makes their love story so different from, say, Aragorn and Arwen's. It's not this big epic romance, but it feels so real, so powerful.
Yeah, there's a quiet beauty to it. And I think that really speaks to Faramir as a whole, doesn't it? He's not about grand gestures. He's not trying to conquer the world.
He's just good.
Yeah.
You know, he wants to protect what he loves, make things better for the people around him.
Exactly. But then we get to the movies, and things get a little messy.
Let's talk about Peter Jackson's Faramir. Big yikes from a lot of fans.
Oh, yeah. Book fans were not happy with that portrayal.
For good reason.
Yeah.
They basically had him almost giving in to the ring, even thinking about taking it to Gondor. Like, hello, did you even read the book?
It was a huge departure from his character. In the books, he rejects the ring outright. No hesitation. That's like his defining moment.
Right. It almost felt like the filmmakers didn't think audiences could handle a hero who was just good. Like they had to add some extra drama, make him tempted by the ring to make it more interesting.
It's a valid point. I mean, making a movie from a book is always tough. You have to make changes. But this one felt like it missed the whole point of Faramir.
Totally. David Wenham did a decent job, though. You could see the nobility in his performance, but the writing just didn't do him justice.
You can have a great actor, but if the script's off, it's off. It just goes to show how strong Tolkien's writing is, though, that even a messed up Faramir still resonated with people.
True. Okay, but let's get back to Book Faramir, the real Faramir.
Mm.
Earlier, you mentioned how he challenges the whole idea of what a hero should be. I'm curious to hear more about that. Like, how does he compare to, say, Aragorn?
Oh, that's a great question. Aragorn is like textbook hero material, destined for greatness, claims his birthright, leads armies to victory. It's epic.
Yeah. Big, bold, in-your-face heroism.
Exactly. But Faramir, he's more like the unsung hero. He's not after glory. He doesn't want power. He's happy to serve, to protect, to quietly rebuild.
He's the guy who's there to pick up the pieces after the big battles are over.
Yeah, and those guys are important too, right? We need those people too. It's a different kind of leadership, one that I think gets overlooked a lot, but Tolkien clearly saw the value in it.
Well, yeah. Just look at how he portrays Ithilien, the land Faramir commands. It's described as this haven of peace, almost like a hidden paradise.
Right. It's not just some strategic location. It represents Faramir's inner world, his values, what he wants the world to be. Remember how it's called the Garden of Gondor?
Like this place of beauty and growth, even with all the darkness around it?
Exactly. It mirrors Faramir himself, resilient, enduring. And if we pay attention to how he governs Ithilien, we see those same qualities in his leadership. He doesn't try to exploit the land or the people there. He's all about preserving things, restoring them, making sure they'll last.
Which is the total opposite of how Denethor operates, right? Denethor's all about control, about dominating everything. Makes you wonder what Gondor would have been like if Faramir had been in charge.
Now that's an interesting what if. I think Tolkien was pointing to a very different model of leadership with Faramir, one that's more in harmony with nature, more focused on people's well-being instead of just grabbing power.
I love that idea. And it makes me even more curious about what happened to him after the War of the Ring. He becomes the Prince of Ithilien, right? But we don't get much detail beyond that.
Yeah, it's kind of left up to our imagination. But if we follow the breadcrumbs Tolkien does give us, I think it's safe to say that Faramir would have been all about healing and rebuilding. Ithilien was hit hard during the war, so getting those communities back on their feet would have been huge.
And knowing Faramir, he wouldn't have just been sitting in some fancy castle barking orders. He'd be out there with the people, getting his hands dirty, listening to what they needed.
Totally. And don't forget, he's a scholar at heart. He'd be using all that knowledge about Gondor's history and culture to find the best ways to rebuild, to honor the past while still moving forward.
Like a perfect blend of tradition and progress. That's a rare combo.
It is. And it shows us that true leadership, it's not just about power. It's about understanding, about having empathy, about wanting to serve something bigger than yourself.
And that's what we see over and over with Faramir, whether it's resisting the ring or comforting Elwyn or protecting the people of Ithilien.
He's a man of action, but he's also got this deep integrity, this compassion that guides everything he does.
And that's why he sticks with you. Even though he's not like the main hero of The Lord of the Rings, he represents something different, something that a lot of us crave, I think.
Yeah, totally. His story keeps resonating with people because he shows us that heroism doesn't always have to be loud and flashy. It can be quiet. It can be about making the hard choices, about staying true to what you believe in, even when it's tough.
It's a reminder that we don't all have to be Aragorns or Gandalfs to make a difference. Sometimes the most powerful acts are the ones that no one even sees.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And that's why these deep dives are so rewarding, It's not just escaping into these stories. It's about finding meaning in them, finding inspiration. We can learn a lot from these characters, even the ones who aren't always in the spotlight.
So true. And I feel like with Faramir, we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover, so many layers to his story.
Definitely. We've touched on his family stuff, his moral struggles, how he finds love and forgiveness, his vision for a better world. But there's this whole other level to Faramir that we haven't even gotten into yet, his symbolic significance.
Oh, color me intrigued. Tell me more about this symbolism.
Well, even his name is loaded with meaning. Faramir, in Tolkien's made-up language, it translates to sufficient jewel. Like he's this hidden treasure, his value not immediately obvious.
Wow, that's amazing.
Right.
Tolkien's basically telling us, hey, look closer. There's more to this guy than you think.
Exactly. And I think that symbolism carries over into his whole role in the story. He's not the typical hero, the warrior king. He's the quiet leader working behind the scenes, protecting and preserving what matters most.
He's the one picking up the pieces, tending to the wounds, offering hope when things feel hopeless.
Yes. And in a way, he's like the opposite of all those stories about power and conquest. He shows us that true strength can be about humility, about compassion, about being willing to serve something greater than yourself.
It's a totally different perspective on what it means to be powerful. And honestly, it's a perspective we could use a lot more of these days, don't you think?
100%. It makes you wonder, how would a leader like Faramir handle the stuff we're dealing with today?
Ooh, good question. I think he'd be all about diplomacy, about finding ways for people to work together instead of fighting. He'd be a champion for the environment, making sure we're taking care of the planet for future generations. And he'd be fighting for justice, for equality, making sure everyone has a chance to thrive.
That's a pretty awesome vision for a leader. It's a challenge to all of us, really, to think about what kind of world we want to leave behind. Not just what we can get from it, but what we can give.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have a part to play in making that happen. We might not be ruling kingdoms, but we can still live by those values, right? Integrity, compassion, being good stewards of what we've got.
Absolutely. And that's why Faramir's story is so hopeful. Even though it's set against this backdrop of war and darkness, he shows us that even in the toughest times, there are people working to bring light, to heal, to rebuild. Those quiet heroes are out there, and they deserve our respect.
And maybe, just maybe, by hearing their stories, by understanding what they stand for, we can be a little bit more like them ourselves.
Now that's a thought worth holding on to.
It really is. Well, I think this has been an incredible deep dive into the world of Faramir. He might not be a household name like some of the other Lord of the Rings characters, but I think we've shown that he's got a lot to teach us about what it really means to be a hero.
It's been a privilege to unpack all this with you. And for everyone listening, remember to keep an eye out for those Faramirs in your own lives. They might not be wearing crowns or swinging swords, but they're making a difference, quietly and steadily, and that's something worth celebrating.
It's wild, right? This whole story takes place in this fantasy world with like elves and orcs and magic rings. But Faramir's story, it just feels so relatable.
It's true. It's not just about the battles and all that external stuff. It's about the inner battles Faramir's fighting. The self-doubt, the pressure from his dad, resisting the ring, all while trying to stay true to himself.
Oh, totally. I think everyone's felt that at some point, right? That feeling of having to fit in, to meet other people's expectations, even when it feels wrong.
Absolutely. And Faramir shows us it's possible to break free from that. You can carve your own path, even if it means people disapprove, even if it means getting rejected.
He's all about integrity, doing what you believe in, even when it's hard, even when no one's looking.
Exactly. And that's something I think we could all use a bit more of in the world today.
For sure. Faramir is like this guidebook for living a good life, even when everything's crazy around you.
He is. And remember how he governs Ithilien? He could have been a tyrant, easily. Used all the resources for himself, ruled with an iron fist.
But that's not Faramir.
Nope. He chooses to be a steward. He wants balance, respect for the land, respect for the people.
It goes against everything we usually think of as powerful, doesn't it?
Right.
He's not about conquering. He's about preserving things.
Exactly. He understands that everything's connected to the land, the people, the past, the future. We need more of that kind of thinking in the real world, don't we? With climate change and everything else going on.
It's like Faramir's showing us a whole different way to lead. One that starts with empathy, with understanding, with respecting the balance of life.
It makes you wonder, how would someone like Faramir handle the problems we're facing today?
Oh, that's a great question. I think he'd be all about diplomacy, about getting people to talk to each other instead of shouting. He'd be fighting to protect the planet, to make sure there's something left for our kids and grandkids. He'd be pushing for fairness, for everyone to have a chance to succeed.
It's a pretty inspiring vision, honestly. It's about thinking long-term, not just about what we want right now, but about what kind of world we're leaving behind.
And it reminds us that we have a part to play in that, too. We might not be kings or queens, but we can still choose to live with integrity, with compassion, to be good caretakers of the world around us.
Absolutely. And I think that's why Faramir's story is so powerful. It's set in this world full of darkness and war, but it gives us hope. It shows us that even in the worst times, there are people out there who are fighting for good.
People who are trying to heal, to rebuild, to make things better. We need to pay attention to them to appreciate what they're doing.
For sure. And maybe by learning about them, by thinking about what they stand for, we can find a way to be more like them ourselves.
That's a really beautiful thought. And I think it's the perfect way to wrap up this deep dive into Faramir. He might not be the most famous character in The Lord of the Rings, but I think we've shown that he's got a lot to teach us about leadership, about resilience, about choosing to do what's right, even when it's hard.